Remakes and sequels to retro games are all the thing these days, and they're very welcome. That core gameplay you loved in the 80s and 90s, but with modern graphics, and also easy to obtain legally and run on modern devices? Win! But are they always better? Would you be better off tracking down the original instead? Do they retain and build on all that you remember from your childhood, or ruin it forever? For that matter, is the original game you played in your childhood any good now we live in the future? Well, let's find out about one such title. And it's one where the original is both infamous and almost impossible to get hold of. The Great Giana Sisters. Now, Giana Sisters is interesting because, as an original release, it's rarer than someone who genuinely likes Rise of the Robots. It's either a mid-era 8-bit or early-era 16-bit platformer, depending on how you look at it, being originally released in 1987 on the C64, and had versions in various stages of production for a few others, including finished versions for the CPC, Amiga, and ST. And for the reason it's rare, let me just play the first part of the game split screen with another leading video game you might recognise. You've probably noticed a certain similarity, and so did Nintendo. Press ads like this probably didn't help either. Nintendo never actually took any legal action, but they certainly implied to both retailers and the publishers Rainbow Arts that this was a very real possibility if the game wasn't immediately withdrawn from sale. Rainbow Arts, being a fairly small company, immediately complied, and commercially, that was the end of the Great Giana Sisters. The accusation is mostly fair once you play it, to be honest. The first level is shorter than Mario's, but it's bloody close to being a carbon copy. The second level, while not really resembling Mario's, is immediately set underground. Powering up, in this case using power wheels to turn into Punk Giana, allows her to break blocks, which unlocks the old Mario trick in this level of just running along the top. The two-player mechanic is identical too. Giana has a sister called Maria, who player 2 can play in a non-simultaneous fashion. I can only assume Giana's name is Giana to fully make the similarity complete. There's even that name. Super Mario, Great Giana. Whether you personally think it's enough that the game should have been pulled, it's hard to deny it feels like a deliberate attempt at copying. And artist Manfred Trenz at least admitted as much, saying the idea came from Rainbow Arts management. The controversy, though, doesn't change that, for a British computer game, Giana feels years newer than it actually is. It's only 2 or 3 years removed from the likes of Jet Set Willy, but it feels from another era. It's not quite as responsive as the NES game it homages, but it's bloody close. The collision detection is sometimes cheap, the inertia sometimes a little off, but this is a grown-up platform game when most teams were still figuring out how to make any of this work. At 33 stages, I'm not going to see most of them. For a £10 Commodore 64 game, it's huge. It's quite the effort that they fit it into the space available, especially given the amount of music floating around. Not many magazines got to review it before it was pulled. Zap got a little overexcited and gave it 96%, although Jazz Rignall describes it literally as a clone of Super Mario Bros. Amstrad legend Rod Lawton reviewed it on every format except CPC for some reason, turning in more considered verdicts in the 70s for all of them. The remaining UK magazines hovered around an 8 out of 10. For me, that's about right. I don't know of much from the time that's as grown up as this. In a world of single-screen identikit levels and poorly canned jumping physics, it was a step beyond. It'd be interesting to know how it would have been remembered if it had a normal life rather than the mythical status that it would actually attain. Giana's music too, by Chris Hulsbeck, has an equally cult following, being remixed by everyone in sight, and featuring heavily in live performances of period video game tunes. You'll know Chris from Turrican, Apidya, and the tune you heard at the start of this episode. While you listen to some of it in the intro, notice another quirk. If you've read the episode title, you'll see Giana with one N, but the intro has 2. One N was a typo on the box art that never got corrected and became canon for later games. All the mystery around the game, of course, meant that interest in Giana was strong, especially in the pre-internet days. Giana Sisters gained quite the cult following. Inevitably, the surviving discs were hot property on the piracy circuit, and were used as a base for unofficial ports to a slew of PC and mobile operating systems, as well as one, inevitable and ironic unofficial port to the Nintendo DS. A sequel was commissioned, set in a future world, but it was ultimately decided to remove the Giana branding from the game in order to avoid attracting any legal issues, and the game was released with robots in the starring roles as Hard and Heavy in 1989. Then things went quiet for 20 years. By 2009 though, the rights to the game found their way to Spellbound Interactive, a new studio set up by the original designer Armin Gessert. Noticing the interest around the game and its unofficial remake, DTP Entertainment commissioned a proper remake, released in April that year. Really, it's more of a sequel or homage in that it uses different level designs. But the graphical style is right there. It's not as pretty as Nintendo's DS platformers, but it deliberately retains enough of the C64 aesthetic to be instantly familiar to anyone who knew the original. It was criticised by some for being too easy, but it's a lovely thing, which incidentally runs a smidge faster on the original hardware I tested it on compared to this emulation footage I've used for ease of capturing. If you've got a DS, you've probably rinsed all the Mario platformers by now, and if so, absolutely try and get a hold of a copy of this for your next trip somewhere. And here's your challenge. Because if you collect all of the red diamonds, you can eventually unlock the original level designs. I'm not showing you that because I'm not nearly that good. While everyone was trying to do that though, two major things happened. In November 2009, Armin Gessert died suddenly, aged only 46. And then in early 2012, thanks to a much more complex story than we have time for here, Spellbound themselves did not survive the release of the fourth Gothic game, Arcania. It felt like Giana may, finally, have been lost forever. Things didn't go idle for long though. Out of the fallout of Spellbound going under, a former Spellbound employee, Andreas Speer, launched a new company. Black Forest Games immediately employed 2/3 of Spellbound's former staff and launched a Kickstarter to finally develop the true modern-day Giana. In October 2012, they released it. Giana Sisters, Twisted Dreams. The plot of Twisted Dreams mirrors the original. The sisters are sucked into a dream world, and the only way to escape is to collect a buttload of gems and eventually find the Giganto gem to escape with. But instead of non-sequential co-op, Twisted Dreams somehow manages sequential single player. At the start, Maria gets kidnapped by a dragon, and Giana gives chase. The game retains Giana's regular and punk personas from the original game. Now though, Giana knows she's in a dream, and thus can switch between them instantly and at will. This affects some platforms, the manner of the enemies, the scenery, and crucially, the gems. Some gems only appear for one or other of the personas in collectible format, although you can always see where they are. Switching between them at the right time is vital for both traversal and collection. Giana and Punk also have different moves. Giana has a twist, and Punk a turbo boost. Neatly, these are mapped to different buttons on the default controller, and using them immediately changes you to the right persona, which is a very neat piece of quality of life game design. With the twist, the game also teaches you early that you can get it going with Giana and then switch to Punk without cancelling it, which is helpful to catch some of the gems. It also works very well to give an identity to a game whose origin was of course the exact opposite. It's beautiful too, both in design and execution. Drawing every level twice is a hell of a task to take on, but there's no let-up in the effort made with it. The graphics though pale in comparison to the music. Chris Hulsbeck returns, joined by DS version composer Fabien Del Priore, and Machine Supremacy, who've been making metal versions of songs using the C64 SID chip for 20 years now. The mixing is superb. In general, the game uses Fabien's arrangements for Giana and Supremacy's for Punk, morphing between them as you do. it adds hugely to the atmosphere of a game that's already above the average indie title. I said Giana the original felt years ahead of its time, and so does Twisted Dreams. It's 7 years old now, dating from 2012, but if you released it today, no one would bat an eyelid. It's the equal of anything anyone is doing in that genre now. The PC version has been in the odd Humble Bundle, but it's only a tenner the rest of the time, and you can get it on Xbox 360 and 1, PS3 and 4, and the Wii U. In a very neat twist, the final console to get a version of Twisted Dreams was, inevitably, a Nintendo. In this case, the Switch. Even better, the port was made possible and published by THQ Nordic, the descendants of the original publisher Rainbow Arts. So, we have the spawn of the original developer, making the game Nintendo got pulled from sale on a Nintendo system, published by the spawn of the original publisher. Sometimes the world really does provide the movie ending. Which would I play though? Well, ultimately the original is to various degrees a riff on games that were much better. I don't personally agree, first level aside, that Giana is similar enough to Mario that it should have been pulled, but equally, you'd not play it over Mario. Twisted Dreams, though, is a great, mostly original concept with a gorgeous graphical style, and can be had cheap on essentially everything. Play it, and enjoy the Chris Hulsbeck music. After you enjoyed this Chris Hulsbeck music. And if you want more from Chris, he has a very awesome Patreon where you get at least a track a month, with the license allowing you to, for instance, use it to bookend a video about the Great Giana Sisters. Until next time.